It's not every day on this show that I get to have a conversation with someone who I kind of geek out over. And today's that day. Now, don't get me wrong. I geek out in different ways over all of my guests, and I love my conversations. But this one takes it at a little nerdy level. So when you have two professors in the same room, you know it's going to get a little bit scientific. So everyone, my guest today is Dr. Agnis Stibe, and he is a professor at multiple universities. He's a 4 times TEDx speaker. He has publications and videos and all of that stuff. But why you should listen to this episode? If you've ever wondered why you can know something but not be acting on it, or the people that you lead know something, you've given them that information, you've given them the knowledge, but they're not quite acting on it yet, we're going to demystify that process for you and so much more. So stay tuned. Another episode of Humanized Automation is coming right up. I am thrilled today, everyone, to bring you our very special guest. Welcome to another episode of Humanized Automation. I am your host, Dr. Jill Schiefelbein, and I am joined today by Dr. Agnis Stibe. And before I let him say anything, I want to tell you a story about how we met and got connected, because it's very interesting when you go to conferences. There's always speakers, there's always panels, there's always presentations. And in my world, I'm normally the speaker that is on the stage. And at this conference, it wasn't the case. Dr. Agnis was the one that was on the stage. And he was up there doing his presentation, talking about behavior and hyper performance. And he asks a question of the room. And he was like, how many decisions does an average person make on a day? And he's looking around and there's crickets. I'm like, seriously, nobody knows this? I'm like, 35,000. And you looked right at me and you're like, wait, no one normally answers that, was the look that you had on your face. But it turned out to be the greatest moment, because we had such a great conversation that day around all of your work in not only hyper performance, creating, hyper performing organizations and people within those organizations, but also how it all connects to artificial intelligence and everything that we're doing in the world today at a big scale. So Agnis, welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you're here.
Happy to see you again. And of course, I think just like you, we try to make an impact, a positive impact, helping people to have a healthier relationship with these emerging technologies. So great to be on your show.
No, it's such a cool collaboration. And I want to just dive right in, because everyone, you can read his bio and everything, but this man has such a breadth of interests and experience, from teaching at top universities around the world, literally having just taken on a new post over in Vietnam with an Australian university. I mean, it's wild. He does research on all corners, has a company, produces that research, creates models for organizations. And what's really cool right now that he's been working on for a number of years, but it's really coming into light now, is this idea of a knowledge behavior gap. And he's done so much work that he's built a model around it. So what is this knowledge behavior gap, and where are you seeing it?
Let's start with the obvious observations in our societies. Let's look at the health campaigns. And they want to introduce that you take a bike and ride to the park and have a free lunch or something like that. But all of those and many scientific efforts usually produce marginal to negative effects on the long-lasting sustainable behavior change. And I was like, what's wrong with this? So as a scientist explorers, we ask questions, and then we dig into what's in there. And then I realized, while there have been very foundational discoveries and technology acceptance, but technology acceptance usually starts not with the knowledge, but accepting technology and then intending to use it and then actually using it. But rarely, or the only theory was innovation diffusion theory that speaks about the knowledge. But then if I step back and have like a helicopter view on what's happening in society and in science, I realized, well, there are so many times that leadership people and managers in organization, they come with something like an innovation or a change or an update in an organization that people would need to do something differently. What they do, they supply knowledge. The same also goes with the societies, and the government says, okay, now you do this. And everyone expects that people are rational. Well, some of them know that we are not. But then the expectation is if people knew how to do better, they would do it. which is not the case. And then I realized, well, if there is this gap between knowledge and behavior, what's in between? What are the steps? What are the steps if we, as the leaders, or in the future, and also today, technology can help guide people from knowledge to find it relevant and meaningful so that they accept it. Oh, that knowledge actually helps me to perform better or helps me to get where I want to get. So it's acceptance. And after acceptance, people sometimes say, yeah, smoking is kind of also bad for my lungs, but they don't have any intention to change their routine around what they do with the smoking. But then the next step after acceptance is, where do you see that new accepted knowledge fits into your routine and where you can place and actually use it? And then that's intention. And if you have that step done, then the behavior is much more likely to happen. So that's a very simple explanation of the model. What it brings a tool to the hands of the managers, leaders, governors, that if you have done and introduced something novel, an innovation, and you want to see which groups of people are falling off that track and where, then this tool is very helpful and you can do it anytime, whether they are not accepting it. So sometimes, like the beginning is, some people might not know it. So that's why they are not participating. But people who know, they might not accept it. And those people who accept it maybe don't intend to use that accepted knowledge. And that's why behavior is not happening. And that tool is very handy and helpful to use in these situations.
I really like that. And it makes me go back to, I mean, my goodness, my early communication behavioral theory study days. And one of the theories that I often talk about, or the model that I've changed a little bit to, suit my needs, of course, but really to simplify it so audiences understand, I would say even is kind of a precursor to the beginning part of your knowledge stage in that model, which is what is joined around what's called the latitudes of commitment, or the latitudes of acceptance or rejection. And when I'm training people in sales, their idea is that, hey, I'm going to go from conversation to sale in one interaction, from knowledge to all of a sudden behavior, just because I'm your boss and I handed you this thing and said, here, go do it. And the reality is, I give them the analogy that there's 10 chairs. And at first, this person is sitting in chair 0. Their goal is to get to 10. That's their action, right? If you can get them to even stand up out of their chair in an interaction, you have made some progress. So to start thinking of those like steps along the way, and that's from a communicative standpoint that leads into an action, but having something go from, okay, I know about this now, to accepting it, like you said, to the intention and setting the intention, that's something that takes it a little step further. And I'm curious what you find is most effective in kind of that intention setting phase.
Well, and again, let's not create kind of a heaviness around the intention. It not always has to be very rational, heavy tasks. So the intention is basically a change into your routine. It's as I gave the example, the people who might reduce their smoking habit, for example, their routine is to go to a certain place on their trajectory when they move through the city and get those cigarettes. Maybe they ordered them something. So those are those kind of customer journey, let's say. And it's just a slight change. You just change, instead of going that street, you go that street, and you don't go by that kiosk usually they where you buy the cigarettes, and that's it. That doesn't require a super heavy lifting of your brain. So that's, again, just to demystify a little bit that intention. The intention is kind of, you see the place, you see the chance and opportunity in your daily routine where that change will manifest itself, where that new knowledge will come in. And I think, psychologically speaking, because intention is more like a pragmatic, practical thing. It's how that's a precursor to the behavior, and we know that. We scientists, we behavioral science. But then the acceptance is even more sophisticated and peculiar, because it's all about how many decisions we make, and we have to make a decision. Do we accept? To what degree we'll accept? Maybe we'll accept part of the knowledge. Maybe we'll accept that the part of the knowledge applies to others, not to us, and then that part is applying to us. So I think the first step to getting from knowledge to the acceptance is somewhat more demanding, but also somewhat much more rewarding. And there is another tool, and I can explain it later. It's what I have discovered in my practice, and which I have been teaching also to the organizations, is swapping thoughts. So we have thoughts, and if you look at the basic foundational unit of our thinking, is a thought. I think there's, we can, of course, have a long conversation. Maybe there is, but let's just simplify it. And then if we have a thought that I'm bad at public speaking, or I'm not good at public speaking. And if you have that thought and that resides in your brain, that's it. All the decisions and actions will be accordance to that. But then you do the trick, and there is a recipe for success. The thought have to be complete opposite. Most of the people choose a thought which can coexist with the current thought. The current thought is, I'm not good with the public speaking, but then I'm going to try. And those can coexist. And under pressure, people will give up the new one. So therefore, the recipe is, instead of I'm not good with the public speaking, I am good with public speaking. And that thought, swapping that thought to the opposite, it pushes out the old one. And over time, of course, some people say, well, that's kind of you tricking yourself. But well, you're constructing yourself. Mm-hmm. You're choosing the thoughts that are contributing to where you want to go. And that has been proven, very simple, very straightforward technique. And the same way it explains how the knowledge, when it arrives, whether you're an employee or you're a part of participant in society, or you're just working with yourself, you are choosing how to move yourself from knowledge to acceptance. And of course, you have freedom to choose whichever knowledge you want to accept in your life. But the power is once you have helped yourself to move that direction, it's permanent. It's long lasting. And technologies will be the great help, especially for organizations, to help moving people from knowledge to acceptance, then to acceptance to intention to behavior.
I really like, the simplified thing that you've broken down here. And what else I really like is understanding something is not the same as accepting it. And we see that in many situations today with what is truth. And, I go back to my grad school days and we're like capital T truth or little t truth. But now there's like, what is truth, period, and everything. I am in favor as a researcher, in favor of questioning everything. That's great. But it's now, what does it mean to actually know something and also accept it from, let's take an example in an organization, right? We have all of these tools, artificial intelligence technologies that some people understand, the majority really don't. And there's a whole lot of fear around that. And so in your work and in your research, what are you seeing with kind of the acceptance phase of technology when you're working with companies?
It has always been in our history of evolution. New technologies arrive. I sometimes play, and I think I played in the same conference where we met. I played this video where these ancient people are discussing in a focus group about the wheel. So yes. The one person brought the stone wheel, and the other stood tree like, oh, but if it rolls, it can roll over your feet and then it can roll away, like all these counter arguments. And those are examples of the thought. And that's my passion. When I work with companies, I strongly believe that the people at the top of the hierarchy are great leaders. Their predominant skill set has been trained on the mastering foundation of the business, which means relations with the people, finances, basic other marketing. They understand the basic logic. Rarely they have an education in technology. Right. And that's why they kind of hesitate. They kind of, okay, maybe. And also I would say it's a question of the ego as well, because then you need to accept there is something else smarter in some of the areas, and that would require you to pay attention and sometimes acknowledge, okay, yeah, your suggestion is welcome over here. So those are the things. So what I try to do when working with companies is demystifying that relationship and also helping them to embrace that what's the healthiest way to see technologies, emerging technologies arriving to their service and also the service of their employees and their teams and in their companies. And that's, again, the area of acceptance. And this is where I put a lot of effort to help. Because if they are at the top of the hierarchy, if they will have a healthy perspective of whether ChatGPT is useful in their organization or what areas or what tasks, and they would be speaking, using and communicating that, they would be manifesting and mirroring that, then naturally that will be kind of like a water falling down through the organization. So here it is.
And I think when we've talked and then looking at some of your content and knowing where some of our interests really intersect, what I think is going to be a really cool next question to go into is we both have the view at some level that technology can actually make us more human, that when you combine technology and combine humanity, the best of each part, you can get the optimal result. They call it collective intelligence is one way to put it, right? Where you're getting the best of both worlds and you're producing a result that neither could produce individually. I know I speak so much to leaders about that. Like, listen, this is not about you being able to know everything. I know this field very well. I've spent decades of my life in human computer interaction and education. I don't know everything, but what I do know is people like to be curious when they're given permission to be curious. So how can you as a leader make people more curious about that? And that's how I frame it. So is that kind of me trying to get them to accept it, or like give their ego a pass? What is that?
That's a small child in us. I think everyone has one. It's how we interact with the world and learn what it is. And we learn before we learn speaking as a small kids, toddlers, we don't ask questions. We just use our hands. What's this? But then later, and as we grow up, we still have the same curious kid. And what really triggers to wake up that curious kid is questioning. Asking questions. That's what I've been doing also throughout my talks. Oftentimes people will see that I kind of ask the rhetoric questions, but those questions go straight into the minds of other people and go to that small kid who is curious and like, I want to know this. I want to know the answer to this question. And that's how also we professional speakers keep our audiences engaged. Mm-hmm. And the same applies to the leadership people in organizations. And if they have their first-hand experience, let's say ChatGPT, they use ChatGPT to find a certain way into the questions, into the area of their interest. And they kind of were exploring. And they're telling that story. And of course, storytelling is, again, very foundational for getting the message across and getting the people engaged and getting people like on that journey in their minds. Neuro-linguistic programming. So here, if leaders have the first-hand experience themselves, that means they have helped themselves to cross that bridge, and they're into the knowledge and accepting and finding where it's relevant, and also have the particular view on where they would intend to reuse it again. So pretty much they have run themselves practically through the knowledge behavior gap model. And when they express it in that kind of way, telling the other people, they are setting the path for the other people to repeat that. And that's pretty much giving the permission. In many cases, we know, I think most of us have been employees for some part of our career. And then we expect that somebody will come and tell us what to do, or at least we would expect a feeling when we have received the permission. Mm-hmm. And that's the way how leadership people, by giving that kind of a story with the first-hand experience, and it really triggers the people also to question, okay, can I do it myself? Because it sounds quite doable. And also by seeing that hierarchy up, people have done that kind of gives them permission. And I see that also here at the educational setting, because so many organizations were late to the train. The train arrived with ChatGPT and it's like, what do we do with this now? And it's like, why don't we have more technology savvy people or technology welcoming people in discussions around the table? Because also today, people now in some of the industries, including the education, are sorting out stuff. What do we do with the ChatGPT? Forgetting that there will be next wave coming soon. And yes, we not only need to do with the ChatGPT, but with the next, and have that as a culture from now on. It's always going to be new AI supportive tools challenging the old-fashioned routines.
It's amazing if you think about it, because I love, you show that video of the wheel. I always love talking about Gutenberg and the printing press. I'm like, holy moly, what about the riots that happened with that, right? I mean, human history repeats itself. We are always both simultaneously in awe of and in fear of any new technology that comes around. And what I find very interesting is, if we go back, not even that far, but to 1994, calculators just became allowed on college entrance exams, the SATs, ACTs. That was like not very long ago. So now we've now reframed questions on those tests to allow people to use the tools. And this is not me saying that mental math is not a good skill to have, because of course it is, but it is a not as essential skill as it used to be before that technology came about. So if we can, from that perspective and from generative AI and all of the other things, my belief is if we can take away those more routine processes, those more low level cognitive tasks, then we can actually spend time as humans doing what we do best, which is building, forming, strengthening relationships. That's how we survive as a species.
Exactly. And I think maybe just to continue, well, people also had that one conversation yesterday. There was another organization having this series of talks, and they were like asking similar questions. Okay, how do we see ourselves in terms of the endless question, like repeated question? AI going to take our jobs or something like that? And I said, well, what do I help students understand when it comes to the classroom? And I think my teaching philosophy is not about providing them knowledge. I think my responsibility is to provide them wisdom, at least give them the glimpse of what is the difference and where they can upgrade their perspective and how they can develop their wisdom. And one thing I have discovered in my observations, and I've been repeating it to the students and to the other educational institutions and elsewhere, there's only one skill that I believe will make the difference in our journey onwards. And that's for many people, maybe not for everybody. We have different kind of structure of society. We have to have everyone at the different levels. But for those who really have very strong reliance on their brain and their creativity and their human part of our intelligence, it's critical thinking. And again, we always, when we start a conversation, we need to give a definition because critical thinking can mean different things for different people. So for me, the simplified definition is its ability to choose the best fitting alternative out of many. That's critical thinking. And why? Because we have problems at hand and they will come as we continue living. And then it's a question when the problem has arrived, we seek for solutions and there are many alternatives and there's one that fits the best. And our ability to choose that one from the variety of other ones is, from my perspective, critical thinking. And the more you evidence how for every next solution you have this ability to select one of the best or the best ones, that proves that you have very advanced critical thinking, especially in the era of generative AI. You can ask, okay, how do I write research plan for a professorship of the 6 years? And of course it goes and it looks at all of this and then it bring it back. And of course you tell the keywords, which area you want to and everything else. And it does that. But then you look at this and you say, no, I don't like this. That's not in alignment. And then you critically choose exactly what you want. And I think that's an answer. Similarly, as people are oftentimes afraid of AI because they think it's alien. So I have the one slide in my presentation, so it's just natural expansion of the intelligence. And as you said, it's collective. I use the word unified or united intelligence. It's never been separate. It's the same. We live in the same intelligence. It grows, helping with the technological agents. And the same way as we have intelligence supported and created by these digital agents, we better have more advanced critical thinking to look at what they have created for us so that we have the best selection because it's a new territory. So I would say that's the answer of all of the to remove all the misconceptions and give ourselves the way forward.
Well, I think too, it's then being able to think critically. And then I take it one more step is being able to communicate the process that you went through so that you can get the buy-in and get people on board when you need to get people on board with something to go back to your behavior, right? To result in behavior. And I think it's fascinating, the debates that often happen. And I heard it happening during your presentation. And then like 2 weeks later, I was on stage and the exact same question comes up. And it's, well, should this even exist? And I said, that's not the right question. It does exist. If you want to have a philosophical debate over it, that's a separate conference. This is a business conference where we're learning to, think critically about how it can be used and also, mitigate the nefarious circumstances, mitigate the risks that are involved in it. And from my perspective, it's when you look at things like that, sometimes people think like I talk that the show's called Humanized Automation. Some people think automation is a dirty word. Well, it's sexy because that's efficiency and efficiency can be more profit. But, it's a dirty word because it strips people of their humanity. And I disagree. I think when it's done well, you can actually automate experiences that serve your customers in a more human way because you can collectively get more information about them if you have someone who's smart enough to critically analyze it and know where to put it.
Exactly. And, I love these questions. As a scientist, explorer, I see how the collective intelligence of the current society is generating these questions and maintaining these questions, kind of protecting their old ways of living. And what do I do? I don't want that. So I create a kind of a counter story. Here it is. Just following the thoughts that you were just providing. And what is automation and where automation exists in human experience and in human body? It's called habit.
Yeah.
we have automated our one routine so many times that I'm usually stay away from conversations on terminology because that's it's a kind of oftentimes a road to nowhere, especially if there are conflicting thoughts about that. But then generally, what I try to pull out as an argument, and I have done that in conversations with AI ethics, for example, I say there is nothing about the AI in the ethics. It's all about humans, how they use this tool. But the other thing is all the words that oftentimes statistically have been used in a negative context over time has gotten a negative connotation. Manipulation, for example, it's a neutral word. And the same propaganda. It's a neutral word. Automation.
Conflict.
Yeah.
Neutral word.
Yeah. All of these are neutral words which have statistically been used mostly in negative context. That's why people perceive it. Well, nothing wrong with our perception. That's how we are. It's a habit. So we have a neural network in our brains that represented manipulation, most likely as, again, used in negative context. But no, the word itself is neutral. This is what I do when I play with the minds of my students. Not really play, when I try to, let's say, give those minds a little bit more broader perspective. Then I say, okay, but this is as I said, I always start with the question and I ask them, okay, manipulation, is it the positive or negative? I just usually draw on the whiteboard. I said, draw a line and I say, this is the neutral, this is negative, this is positive. Where do we place the word? And then I pick some random word and then I say, where do we place manipulation? And then of course, naturally, everybody goes, it's like skew to the negative. Oh, it's negative. And then I say, well, are you sure? And they're like, of course, but they are already suspicious because professor is asking the next question, which is counterintuitive. And then in the end of the day, I think this simple task and exercising, where do we have biases? And that's just a simple version of the bias. And the more the brain and the mind is exposed to simply our biases, the more the brain and the mind is opening up to question every next situation. And I think this is one of the good things that professors can do with the students, just like opening up the minds, not really necessarily removing the biases, but at least opening up the possibility to question every next thing, because they're going to go to the other class and there'll be other professors, and they might not give the same, but then the students, when they're prepared to question those, they might get most of what they have a right for at the university.
And then they've gotten some knowledge and they've probably even moved to some acceptance, if not intention from that, right? So
yeah, and here I would really like to make a very clear distinction, and this is what also applies to the education, whether that's at the university, whether it's training at the organization, whether that's a kind of a practice session, as most of these activities are oriented primarily on the knowledge. And that's good. That's how we evolve, and we create knowledge, we learn, and we share it. But knowledge only makes the life simpler which means we understand. Knowledge means understanding, and if we understood it, oh yeah, I understand. Well, I use this metaphor over here. I have another one, and I explain later a little other kind of a perspective on this. But then the people, when they don't know that there is an algorithm, like I was at the age of 8, and I thought I'm different, I'm miserable, I cannot solve it. But at the age of 8, when I got the first time, I didn't know something. Here, later, after a few decades, I've learned that there is an algorithm. There was a guidance coming in the box with the cube. And I was shocked. Like, seriously, that's my life story. At the age of 8, 9, 10, I really gave up and I thought something's wrong with me. But I didn't know there is an algorithm. I thought I have to guess it. But now, when I know it, it gives me the understanding, okay, now it's just simpler. I can look at it and I can know there's an algorithm, but only with practicing the algorithm, practicing the knowledge, solving the cube gets simpler. So that's a huge distinction. Knowledge makes the life simpler, but not easier. You need to do the behavior to repeat it so that the knowledge into the practice, and then it gets easier. So currently, of course, I use this as a metaphor on the stage as well to show another thing. I can explain it later. But generally, one fundamental thing is also that bias that knowledge will solve everything. No, we behavioral scientists know knowledge simpler, behavior easier.
If you know something, the next step is being able to, how well you know it is often, in education settings, can you teach it to others? Or even in organizational settings, if you know something, okay, great, can you teach it to others? And that is a process of your brain now being able to simplify a concept in a way that moves to other, the power of story, metaphor, analogy, all of that. But then, as you said, it's that practice of it over time. So whether it's you're a speaker and you have more practice doing an activity or telling a story on stage, or you're a leader in an organization who says, you know what, I don't have to know everything about technology, and I'm going to practice my acceptance of self and my letting go of ego, that my ego doesn't need to hold on to this over and over and over again to get results. And then not only are you simplifying your day, but then it does become easier when the people below you who have an affinity for technology are the ones bringing results back.
So yes, and again, speaking about automation, this is the behavior. For the human part, the behavior puts your chosen routine into the automation. So currently, an example of automation that I use at the end of my talks is I pull out the cube. I ask usually one person. I usually ask how many people have had the cube in their hands, and then how many try to solve it, and then how many actually solved it. And usually it's roughly around 5% have. And sometimes also ask, can somebody do it right now? And that's kind of maybe goes down from 5 to 2%, but that's fine. Then I ask somebody to shuffle it, and then they give me the cube back, and then I say, that was a questions and answers. So I will start. I ask the question, do you want me to solve the cube on a stage? And of course, people say, yeah, we want you to solve the cube. I say, I have one condition. They say, what? I say, I will solve the cube only if you ask me the questions at the same time. So if you stop asking questions, I stop solving the cube. Everybody kind of goes crazy, like, what? Like, it's not only you're solving it, but you are having the Q&A at the same time. I say, exactly that. And and then we start. And then after, let's say, because I can solve the cube in like 2.5 minutes, the speed is not important. What I try to manifest with this is the power of automation. I have done the cube and used my eyes and hands. These are the tools that I have used for the automating to solve the cube with the subconscious brain. So many times that it runs without demanding anything from my conscious part of the brain in terms of ears listening to your questions and my mouth answering. So there are different devices connected to different parts of the brain, and they can run. Well, it's not really simultaneously, of course. We know that multitasking is screwing up things at the same, like many things at the same time. But there is a kind of it gives the impression of the multitasking, and I've been doing it, and it works. And then the people go like, So that's a pure evidence that our neuroplasticity welcomes to automate anything in your life. And it's just a proof. And if you want to do that, you just solve the cube and you will evidence it for yourself.
And I think This example, and I think we can all think of something that we do that now is habit, right? I am not cool enough to solve a Rubik's Cube while people are asking me questions, but I crochet. It's the same thing. I will be sitting and having a conversation with people and they're like, you're not paying attention. I'm like, yeah, I am. I can tell you everything you just said. I have no commentary to add to it. What he just added to it was great. I'm just sitting here doing my thing because I've done it tens of thousands of times. And it's something that brings me peace or it's something that brings me comfort. And we all have those habits or hobbies, whatever meditative state you get into. For me, cycling, once I get into that rhythm and cycling on the road, as long as there's not crazy traffic, I can just go for hours and not have to worry about that. And my brain is free to think about higher level things. But I think when we look at this and think of behavioral change in people, in organizations, kind of tying it back up as we wind our time down together. I think what's really interesting is so many people, from my perspective, and I'm very curious on yours, Agnes, is we don't give ourselves enough time with a new tool, a new technology, a new process to have it become automated for us. So it really does get easier. We never get past knowledge, or maybe we get to, simplicity a little bit. We don't get to easy because we don't give it enough time. Do you see that, or is that just me?
No, Jill, you just brought up a very foundational reason and barrier for technology acceptance, generally speaking, in the society, in the organizations. And I have realized, just the answer came to my mind just now by listening. It's because most of our society doesn't have the IT degree, which is fine. This is how we are. We need everybody. And if you look, maybe, I don't know, I will be guessing like maybe 5% are technology educated, maybe they're just self-educated, something like that. So for all the other people, because they look at technology, and again, humans through the centuries, they like magic. So somebody comes in and kind of does the magic trick. And those people who are not technologically savvy or literate, they look at technology as this magic. And then it creates the expectation that this magic is going to do something more for me. And that expectation, that anticipation is the answer why it does happen. So they just say, oh, if that magical generative AI, this ChatGPT can do so many things, so it should be so great that it should know what I mean. Like it's like I can imagine. So people write a prompt, which is the first time you use the ChatGPT, for example, they write a prompt and the prompt messes a lot of details. And they was like, no, the ChatGPT is actually not that good as other founders are. But yeah, they don't give time to get and build that healthy relationship to learn what this tool can do for me and what I need to become to be very efficient user of that tool. And I think that's, yeah, it just comes down to that expectation that if I don't know what technology is, I have set super high expectations of what it should be. On the other hand, my takeaway for when I speak with technology audiences, when I go back to MIT, when I speak with these great engineers, and this is what I said also in the conference. Well, engineers, mechanical engineers, software engineers, electrical engineers, they will perfect and they will improve everything. And also all this AI are going to be better and better. No problem about that. So first layer, they make this thing work faster, more efficiently. The second is user experience, and that has been around for decades as well. How users, whether they're happy, whether they feel easy of use, and all of those things that also scientists study. That's a second layer. So the users feel comfortable or feel of knowing where to press and what. But I say, you technologists, you can also know, if you know that the humans are the way they are, with all the peculiarities of the nature, you can not only make the thing run fast and the user happy, you can also build in some of the functionalities and features that will help overcome that nature that is resistant. So giving the guidance, giving the help, reading the situation, so technology can do it for the user. So the users are helped with minimizing their expectations or fine-tuning their expectations. They're setting the right anticipations from technologies. It can be done. And that's what I come and give as the vision and inspiration for the technologists and engineers. That's also important.
No, I think it's so important to, calibrate those expectations. And I think that, I'll go and they're like, okay, so you're talking to us about AI, so I'll be able to grow my business faster. And I said, well, if you have all of the right pieces of the puzzle already together and you're just plugging this one in as a tool, yeah. But your data is a hot mess. It's all over the place. You want to personalize communications at scale. You don't have your data in one single place that is organized. It's concatenated over here. It's separate over here. Like, this makes no sense. Like, you got to do some of that work. But to your point, good systems. Someone asked me, this was like a year or two ago, what do you predict is going to be the next big, thing in AI or technology? And I said, the company, the person, the product that can make it easy for everyday humans to dump all the junk that they have into one thing, and this thing normalizes all of it and cleans all of it. Like, that's going to be very, very useful, because to your point, we have to not only make the screen pretty and the clicks minimized for the user experience, right? I know that's a very simplified view of UX, but we also have to make sure that there aren't any obstacles to bigger adoption. And like, when you're, in customer experience, like I am with my avatars with render, it's what are the biggest hurdles to actually getting that use? And then how do we re-engineer what we have to eliminate or at least reduce the friction in those obstacles? But that's, again, trying to get people from that knowledge to behavior with your model. And, for us, it's the more and more people use it, the more efficacy someone has with something, the more empowered they feel to get curious and creative. Because when we're in fear, when we're operating based on this, okay, am I doing it right question, our minds are not fundamentally able to be in the curious part when you're focusing on process and procedure.
Oh, great that you mentioned, yes, avatars. I know when we met, you were working on that. You did your PhD in that, and very great. And I can tell from my personal experience, I've seen that your avatars, they look real.
Yeah.
And when I watch some of the YouTube commercials, I don't pay for the YouTube subscription, so I have a lot of chance to see YouTube commercials. And I look at some of them and I question, like, these look like avatars are speaking to me. Like, because of my background, I have more fine-tuned maybe the perspective. And I know there will be so many people that have no clue. They think it's just a regular person speaking very nicely. But of course, we technology related people, we kind of, yeah. And this happened just over the last few days, and I was like watching this, and I sometimes just tend to see what the people do in the commercial world, how they create the advertisements and everything. But I was, okay, this looks like an avatar. At the same time, and it's not a secret, I would be much more successful myself if I would use the avatars and create and share the knowledge. Because I know I've been recording. I have a YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is very silent for the last year or so. It was more active before. And then again, I think my automated way to see the world is, if there are new technologies about to arrive, why shall I invest my time and effort to set up the cameras and everything and find the light and right mood and the right facial expression and everything else to get the video done if the avatars are coming? And I think that's why my channel has been dormant for some period of time. And now, thanks that you reached out to me recently, and I was like, that's a turning point also, I think, in the way how I, as a scientist and a communicator, would be able now to leverage the power of avatar and to just automate that. Because the knowledge itself doesn't lose its meaning. It just makes the way and the effort much more doable and much faster to get that communication out. So actually, I look forward to find a ways how to use some of your magic.
No, well, yeah, it's magic with no work involved, right? And well, what I can tell you though, from the dissertation, there was no statistically significant difference between people who watched my avatar and me when it came to information retention. None at all. So my human ego was kind of like, wait a second, I thought I was pretty good at this. But at the end of the day, if someone's interested in learning about something, they have a likeness. I need to turn off my reactions, but yes, good. We're happy about this. They have a likeness or a relationship with someone. The social presence of that person goes to reinforce that. So the trust is still there, especially as I always am, if you're very transparent about what you are using and even why you're using it. Hey, this is enabling me to get content to you faster. This is enabling me to get content to you in 28 different languages. So you're not listening to this if English is your second, third, or fourth language. You're listening to it in your native tongue, which may not be completely fluent and perfect with your colloquialisms, but it is dang good. And we're going to learn differently when we listen in our native language versus second or tertiary language. And that's also proven in many studies. So I'm excited to talk to you more about that outside of the show.
Yes, yeah, definitely we'll do that. And I think why people, well, generally, okay, I can tell you. I think last week we had a conversation with one of my colleagues, professors at the business school here, and he and we went on a journey to explore how we can be more successful as a communicators of science. And we were kind of criticizing a little bit of the outdated publishing industry and how it originated and how it's gonna need to transform soon. And then at one point I said, for me, when I look at the world and I see all of this advertisements on Facebook, on YouTube, and elsewhere where there are new trainers, new master classes, and I see those as a red ocean in some degree. And well, I'm not judging anyone, but when I ask myself, where do I see myself? And I see myself into finding a way so I can translate what I know in a easy consumable way for an ordinary person. And if I'm successful, it's a great challenge. And I like great challenges, but it's so demanding and it might take some time, maybe forever, I don't know. But then if I'm successful and a person looks at what is communicated, and then that's somewhat related to what you said. So if the avatar brings something that is understandable, relatable, and useful and meaningful for the challenge of the person. Because what we experience, we go through life and we have some of the tasks and the questions and the challenges. And if somebody can help with those, we are super happy. That's why we ask for help if there are other professionals can fix things for us. The same way, if somebody stumbles upon a video or just asks ChatGPT or Google and says, I want to understand how to get rid of the negative thoughts in my head or counterproductive thinking, and they just type it in, and then you do a video of Agnis Stibe shows up and say, okay, there's the tool, you're swapping the thoughts, and they're like, okay, let me try. And they try and they, oh yeah, it works. At that moment, I don't need to run any Facebook ads, any LinkedIn ads. It's just the person will manifest itself. It will tell friends and family, we got discovered, and it works. So that's a challenge that I've set to myself. And if that communication can be made quicker, easier, more effective through the avatars, well, yes. And the people will look at the content and I use these words: meaningfulness, usefulness, relatedness, not whether that's good or bad. And this is also when I speak with kids, I don't say this is a good, this is a bad. I ask about whether that's appropriate, inappropriate, or whether that's a good fit or bad fit. And I think that applies also for the adults as well.
It absolutely does. Going to give you a tool to look into if you don't already know about it. And then I want to know, as we wrap this up, some tool that you've played around with that, sparks your interest and helps you out. But have you heard of a Notebook LM?
Nope.
All right. In terms of simplifying and everything, your own ideas and codifying things, Notebook LM, you can create your own mini models. So you could upload 5 of your research documents, like all of your research on the knowledge behavior gap, and then ask it specific questions. And it pulls only from, it's like a mini privately trained model in a simple instance.
That's nice. That brings me back a few years. There was a website where I was like, everyone could just upload a YouTube video and it would summarize it. I did use it.
Yes. I know the site. I know what you're thinking of. The name will come to me in 3 hours when I'm asleep and you're still wide awake over in Vietnam. But before we wrap up, I have to know, what is a tool that interests you that you find useful in this AI or automation or tech space?
Well, let me be honest. I'm on the trajectory to get some of the automation and avatars from you soon. But then, as an ordinary person going through life and doing his work, ChatGPT, and also in the conversations with students, I allow them to use it for certain tasks when they need to discover something, and that I think it's very honest. I think in terms of not denying the tool and just use it for a purpose in a specific designed ways. And then they ask me back because again, students look at the professor, especially in this society, professors and teachers in this society. It's something I don't know where, but it's very high in society. It's a very respectful title or the work yes. And then they asked me, oh, what do I use any other Gen AI tools? And I say, I haven't found a reason to do that. The ChatGPT satisfies me. Well, except scientific literature. And then for scientific literature, I also ran recently a kind of internal workshop on what tools, AI tools, scientists can use that use the semantic scholar as the open database. And all of these tools, they use the same database. But again, that's how it works. So the algorithms just pull out work from this semantic scholar, and then the referencing is good. ChatGPT is not good at that, and scientists know that already. But then some students make mistakes, and it's kind of a funny story. So the tool that I use most frequently is ChatGPT, and I as a technology educated. My first master's degree is computer science. My second master is MBA. My PhD is in social psychology for information systems, and then postdoc is about persuasive cities. But then it's really how we can use that technologies and help the people to have a better experience. So that's kind of the main driver for me.
No, I think it is. And I think that sums it up well because the tool itself is only a tool. It's how you use it and the results you get that are important. And so many people keep looking for that magic, right? That high expectation, sprinkle some technology, magic dust on it and make it work. And it does take some work like any tool does. It's the same thing. I mean, think back to the first PowerPoint presentation you ever built. I mean, wow, would you present that today? Probably not. You know, it takes time to gain efficacy in something. And what I admire, Agnes, among many things, is that the scientific research diligence that goes into what you do, into codifying different things, and to even at the end here, being able to say like, yeah, I could have named some crazy far off tool, but no, ChatGPT does what I needed to do. Why would I mess anything else? And I think that's just beautiful in its simplicity. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, for sharing everything what you did, especially about this knowledge behavior gap, that thing in the middle and how we can change that. I really look forward to seeing what comes next from that. But do you have any last thoughts that you want to leave with our audience here today?
Two. One, be curious. Go to ChatGPT anytime you have any question. I can repeat that. Anytime you have any question. And speaking it out loudly, and we know I'm listening, I'm telling it to myself right now, but also I hope it's going to be helpful for others because we have habits and habitually we went to Google search. Many of us now go to ChatGPT, ask anything, anytime, and I need to do it more often. I recommend be curious. For example, I even asked about, can you summarize the poetry of this poet, and can you just tell what it's about? And that poetry is in a small language, generally speaking. So it's a Latvian language. It's just 2 million people speaking that language roughly. And it's just a very tiny kind of a collection of the poetry. And it just does that and says, okay, this is about this, about how the humans relate with nature, about like a more broader perspective and a kind of a deeper meaning of life. And then I said, I was just curious. And I said, can you write for me a few pieces that would resemble that line of poetry? And it did. Of course, it's a Latvian language. There were in 4-liners, and there were 3 mistakes somewhere, just a grammar. But the rest, the tone, the expression, that everything, and I was like reading, I'm thinking about my poetry. I could judge, I said, it looks like mine. And it was generated by ChatGPT. Yes, there were some minor errors, but then I was like, Be curious. Go ask about anything, anytime. So that's number one. Number two is a homework. And it's a question. I will not tell you the answer. These are two cubes. So this has 6 sides. This has 12 sides. And this has an algorithm to solve it. And this has an algorithm to solve it. And not counting how many times you need to turn or repeat this algorithmic step, but how many steps and how many moves in a step. Let's count those steps and the moves in a step. And then we have like a sequence of moves. So this has, and let's say if this is 100% of the algorithm, and this has some algorithm which is different, most likely because it's a different cube. And what is the difference in these algorithms? So that's a homework. I can tell you it's not 0. I can tell you it's not 100. It's not 200. That's a percentage of the difference between this algorithm and this. There is some things that repeat. So anyone who watches this video, and if you have a chance to comment somewhere, get the answer. So this has an algorithm, this has an algorithm. What's the difference in percentages? Please, that's a homework. Look forward to your answers.
You know who's going to dive down that rabbit hole right away besides me? My dad. My dad is going to love that question. I'm going to have to send this for him before it even gets released so he can feel like he had some insider knowledge. That's great. Agnis, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to share on the show. It was great to catch up again.
Likewise. Always great to see you.
Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Humanize Automation. Stay tuned because you know new episodes will be dropping soon.